My son kicked me out of my home to make room for his wife, and I won $8 million 3 months later. I am 73 years old. I raised Gatsby alone after his father died when he was 12. Worked 2 jobs to put him through college. Watched him walk across that stage with tears in my eyes, believing I had given him everything he needed to become a good man. I was wrong. The conversation happened on a Tuesday in March. Gatsby sat in my kitchen, the one where I had made him breakfast every morning for 18 years, and told me I had to leave. His wife Scarlett needed space for her home office. They had already picked out a senior living facility. I had lived in that Brooklyn apartment for 37 years. The same kitchen where I taught Gatsby to crack eggs without getting shell in the bowl. The same living room where he built blanket forts during thunderstorms. The same hallway where I measured his height with pencil marks on the doorframe. After his father died, it became our fortress. Just the 2 of us against the world. I worked double shifts at the diner and cleaned offices at night. Gatsby did his homework at the kitchen table while I counted tips and worried about rent. We ate cereal for dinner some nights, but we were happy. We were home. I watched him grow from a scared 12-year-old boy into a man I was proud of. Graduated high school with honors. Got his business degree. Found a good job at an insurance company. Met Scarlett at a work conference 5 years ago. She was beautiful in that polished way. Perfect blonde hair that never moved in the wind. Clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She smiled when Gatsby introduced us, but her eyes stayed cold. Calculating. The wedding was small, elegant, Scarlett called it. I wore my best dress and tried to ignore how she seated me at the back table with distant relatives I had never met. Gatsby looked happy. That was all that mattered. They moved into a nice apartment in Manhattan. Close enough to visit, far enough that I had to call first. The Sunday dinners at my place became monthly lunches at restaurants, then holiday visits, then phone calls that grew shorter each time. Scarlett was always polite, always had an excuse why they could not stay longer. Work commitments, social obligations, her yoga classes. Gatsby nodded along like a puppet with cut strings. I told myself it was natural. Young couples needed space. I had been the same way at their age, eager to build my own life. But doubt crept in during the quiet moments. The way Scarlett checked her phone when I spoke. How she steered conversations away from family memories. The subtle corrections when Gatsby mentioned something from his childhood. Then Atticus was born. My grandson arrived on a rainy Thursday in October. 8 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect miracle. I held him in the hospital and felt my heart expand in ways I had forgotten were possible. This tiny person who carried my son's eyes and my late husband's stubborn chin. For a while, things felt normal again. Gatsby called more often. They needed babysitting help. I taught Atticus to walk in my living room, read him stories in the rocking chair his grandfather had built, made him grilled cheese sandwiches cut into dinosaur shapes. But Scarlett watched everything, made mental notes, corrected my old-fashioned methods with articles she printed from parenting websites. Gradually, the babysitting requests stopped. They hired a professional nanny instead. More reliable, Scarlett explained. More current with modern childcare practices. The visits became supervised. Scarlett hovering nearby, timing how long Atticus could stay. Making up sudden nap schedules and appointment conflicts. I felt like a stranger in my grandson's life, allowed brief glimpses before being politely dismissed. I should have seen the signs. The way Gatsby stopped mentioning family traditions. How he forgot my birthday 2 years in a row. The careful distance in his voice when we talked. The excuses that multiplied like weeds. But I loved him. I had raised him alone through teenage rebellion and college stress and heartbreaks. He was my boy, my only child, the center of everything I had built after his father died. Love makes you blind to what you do not want to see. The phone call came on a Monday morning in March. Gatsby's voice sounded rehearsed, professional. He asked if he could stop by Tuesday afternoon to discuss something important. His tone carried weight that made my stomach clench. I spent that night cleaning my apartment, baking his favorite cookies, arranging fresh flowers on the table, preparing for whatever conversation required such formal scheduling. They arrived together. Gatsby wore his good suit. Scarlett carried a leather portfolio like she was attending a business meeting. They sat on my couch and made small talk about traffic and weather, while I served coffee and cookies nobody touched. Then Gatsby cleared his throat. He spoke about opportunities, fresh starts, how they had been discussing their future and what would be best for everyone involved. Scarlett nodded along, occasionally adding supportive comments about change being healthy and necessary. My bedroom would make an excellent home office. The apartment had such potential for entertaining colleagues and building professional relationships. They had researched several wonderful senior living communities, places with activities and medical care and people my own age. I listened without interrupting, watched my son avoid my eyes while his wife outlined plans for erasing me from the home I had built around his childhood. She spoke about square footage and renovation budgets and social networking opportunities. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. Where exactly did they envision me living? Scarlett had pamphlets, glossy brochures for facilities with names like Sunset Manor and Golden Years Village, places where people went to wait quietly for death while their families visited on holidays, and felt generous about bringing flowers. I looked at my son, really looked at him, searched for the boy who used to crawl into my bed during storms, who cried when his goldfish died and made me promise we would see Daddy again in heaven. He was gone, replaced by this stranger who spoke in corporate buzzwords about difficult decisions and practical solutions. "When do you need me to leave?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Scarlett brightened immediately. Gatsby flinched as if I had slapped him. 2 weeks, he said, if that worked for me. As if I had a choice, as if any of this had been my decision. They left quickly after that. Promises to help with the transition, assurances about staying in touch, empty words that dissolved the moment the door closed behind them. I sat in my kitchen surrounded by untouched cookies and cold coffee. 47 years of motherhood reduced to a real estate opportunity. 2 weeks to pack a lifetime. I started with the photographs, boxes full of memories that suddenly felt heavy in my hands. Gatsby's first day of school, his high school graduation, Christmas mornings when we could barely afford presents but made magic anyway. Each picture a small knife twisting in my chest. Atticus appeared in my doorway on the 3rd day, 16 years old, and trying to be brave. He helped me wrap dishes in newspaper without saying a word. His tears fell on the comic section. We pretended not to notice. He asked where I was going. I told him I was not sure yet. The truth felt too cruel to speak aloud. That his father had thrown me away like broken furniture. That his mother had planned my exile with the efficiency of a corporate restructuring. Gatsby came by once, stood in the hallway looking uncomfortable while I folded clothes into boxes. He offered to hire movers, as if professional packers could make this less devastating. As if strangers handling my belongings would somehow soften the blow. I declined. This was my mess to clean up. Beatrice saved me from the street, my friend from church, a widow like myself who understood loneliness. She offered her spare room with the kind of gentle insistence that made refusal impossible. I accepted gratefully, knowing I had no other choice. Her house smelled like lavender and old books. The guest room was small but clean, a single bed with a handmade quilt, a dresser that held exactly 3 boxes worth of possessions. Everything I owned in the world fit in 8 square feet. I tried to be grateful, tried to be the perfect houseguest who caused no trouble, and asked for nothing. I cooked dinner and washed dishes and swept the front porch, made myself useful so I could justify taking up space. But charity, no matter how kindly given, tastes bitter after a while. Beatrice never complained, never made me feel unwelcome, but I saw the strain in her careful smiles, the way she rearranged her routine around my presence, how she stopped inviting other friends over because her houseguest made gatherings awkward. I had become a burden, a sad story people whispered about at church social hours. The grandmother whose son threw her out, the object of pity disguised as Christian kindness. 3 weeks into my stay, I walked past my old apartment building. Could not help myself, like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurt. Construction workers carried furniture out to a truck, my kitchen table, the rocking chair where I had nursed Gatsby through fevers and nightmares, pieces of my life being hauled away like garbage. Scarlett stood on the sidewalk directing traffic. She wore designer jeans and held a clipboard, pointed at my belongings and made notes about disposal. My memories had become her inventory list. She saw me watching. Our eyes met across the street. She lifted her hand in a small wave, smiled that perfect smile that never reached her eyes, as if we were old friends meeting by chance, as if she had not orchestrated the destruction of everything I held dear. I turned and walked away, my hands shaking with rage I could not afford to express. That night I lay in Beatrice's guest bed, staring at the ceiling, listened to her moving around her house, the soft sounds of a woman living her own life in her own space, a life I was slowly suffocating with my unwanted presence. The next morning I made a decision. I could not stay here forever, could not keep pretending that temporary charity was a permanent solution. I needed to find my own way forward, even if I had no idea what that looked like. I had $237 in my savings account. Social Security covered basic needs but left nothing for apartment deposits or furniture. The assisted living facilities wanted monthly payments that would drain my resources in weeks. I was 73 years old, with nowhere to go, and no one who wanted me. The realization hit like ice water. I had raised a child, buried a husband, worked jobs that broke my back and spirit, survived everything life could throw at a woman of my generation. But I had never learned how to be homeless. 3 days later, I found myself sitting on a bench in Prospect Park, my purse beside me, a small suitcase at my feet. Everything I owned in the world reduced to what I could carry. I watched other grandmothers push strollers, saw children run to waiting arms, families that stayed together instead of falling apart at the first sign of inconvenience, lives that looked like mine used to look before everything crumbled. The park bench felt like the end of the world, the place where stories like mine came to die quietly, old women with nowhere to go and no one who cared enough to notice. But something inside me refused to disappear, some stubborn part of my soul that had survived loss and betrayal and heartbreak, the same part that had worked 2 jobs to raise my son, that had fought for every good thing in my life. I walked to the bodega on the corner, the same one where I had bought groceries for 37 years, where the owner knew my name and asked about Gatsby when he was young, where immigrant families worked 18-hour days chasing the American dream. I bought a lottery ticket with my last $20, not because I believed in miracles, but because giving up required more strength than I had left, because sometimes the only rebellion available is refusing to surrender, The numbers were random. Quick pick. I folded the ticket carefully and put it in my wallet next to the last photograph I had of my husband. 2 pieces of paper that represented everything I had lost and everything I still hoped to find. The clerk wished me luck in broken English. His smile, genuine in a way I had forgotten, existed. Kindness from a stranger who owed me nothing, who saw me as human instead of problem to be solved. I walked back to the park bench, sat down with my purse and suitcase and lottery ticket, watched the sun set over Brooklyn, over the neighborhood where I had been happy once, where I had believed in family and love and the promise that goodness would be rewarded. Sometimes the world breaks you so completely that rebuilding requires starting from nothing. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you are actually made of. I was about to find out. The phone call came at 7 in the morning. I was making coffee in Beatrice's kitchen, the same routine I had followed for 6 weeks. Instant coffee because I could not afford to be particular about brands anymore. Toast with margarine because butter was a luxury. The voice on the other end was professional, careful. A woman from the New York State Lottery Commission, asking if I was Cordelia Finch, if I had purchased a ticket on March 15th at Brooklyn Bodega on 5th Avenue. My hands started shaking before she finished speaking. $8 million. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I had never learned to speak. She repeated the numbers twice, asked if I was still there. If I understood what she was telling me. I understood. I just could not believe it. The lottery ticket sat in my wallet next to my husband's photograph. The same wallet I had carried for 10 years because new ones cost money I did not have. The same $20 that was supposed to buy groceries had bought me a future instead. Beatrice found me sitting at her kitchen table an hour later, still in my bathrobe, still holding the phone. The coffee had gone cold, but I had not moved to reheat it. She asked if I was feeling well, if I needed her to call a doctor. I looked like I had seen a ghost. In a way I had. The ghost of the woman I used to be before my son threw me away. Before I learned what it meant to have nowhere to go and no one who wanted me. I told Beatrice about the phone call, watched her face change from concern to disbelief to something that looked like joy. She hugged me hard enough to crack ribs, cried tears I was too stunned to shed. But even miracles come with paperwork. The lottery office was sterile and bright, forms to sign and identification to verify and decisions to make about payment schedules. The officials treated me with sudden respect that felt hollow after months of being invisible. They offered financial advisors and investment counselors and tax attorneys, people who wanted to help me manage wealth I had never imagined possessing. I chose the simplest option, annual payments that would arrive like clockwork for the next 20 years. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to stop being grateful for charity I had never asked for. Enough to choose my own path forward instead of accepting whatever scraps others offered. The apartment hunting began immediately. Not because I was ungrateful to Beatrice, but because charity has an expiration date, even when it comes from love. I had worn out my welcome in ways neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I found a place in Park Slope. 2 bedrooms with hardwood floors and windows that faced a small garden. The rent was more than I had ever paid for anything, but money was no longer the obstacle it had been my entire life. The landlord smiled when I signed the lease, called me Mrs. Finch with genuine respect. The same woman who had been invisible on park benches was suddenly worth acknowledging. Wealth had made me human again in ways that broke my heart to recognize. Moving day felt like resurrection. My few belongings looked lost in rooms designed for full lives. But they were mine. My space. My choice. No one could take it away or ask me to leave, or make me feel grateful for taking up room. I bought furniture slowly. A comfortable chair for reading. A dining table where I could eat meals without apologizing for my presence. A bed that belonged to me instead of being borrowed kindness from someone else. The phone started ringing within days. Gatsby called first. His voice carried a warmth that had been missing for years. He wanted to congratulate me on my good fortune. Asked if we could have dinner soon to celebrate. As if celebration had been his idea instead of necessity driving his sudden interest. Scarlett called the next day, her voice bright with the kind of enthusiasm she usually reserved for networking events. She had been thinking about family connections lately, how important it was to maintain relationships with loved ones, how she hoped we could spend more time together now that I was settling into my new situation. The invitations multiplied like spring flowers, dinner reservations at restaurants they had never offered to take me to before, suggestions for family trips and holiday gatherings and special occasions that required my presence. My checkbook, more likely. But they disguised their intentions with words about healing and forgiveness and moving forward together. I listened to their voicemails without returning calls, read their text messages without responding, watch them discover that money could not purchase what they had thrown away so carelessly. The community center needed volunteers for their literacy program. Teaching adults to read felt like giving back in ways that mattered. My students were immigrants and high school dropouts and people who had slipped through cracks that society preferred to ignore. They called me Mrs. Cordelia with genuine affection, brought me pictures of their children and stories about their dreams, asked for advice about job applications and immigration paperwork and navigating systems designed to keep them powerless. These relationships were built on respect instead of obligation, on what I could offer instead of what I needed, on the person I was becoming instead of the person I had been trained to be. Maria was learning English to help her daughter with homework. Carlos wanted to read bedtime stories to his son. Jennifer dreamed of getting her GED and attending community college. Their goals were simple but profound. Education as escape, knowledge as power, reading as freedom. I understood that hunger in ways my privileged son never could. The desperate need to improve circumstances through sheer determination. The willingness to work harder than should be necessary, just to survive. My students never asked about my money or my family drama, or why a woman of my age was starting over alone. They accepted me as I was, a teacher who showed up consistently and treated them with dignity they rarely received elsewhere. The garden behind my apartment became my sanctuary. I planted tomatoes and herbs and flowers that bloomed in colors I had forgotten existed. Dirt under my fingernails felt like proof of life, continuing despite everything that had tried to destroy it. Neighbors stopped to admire my work, asked for advice about their own plants, invited me to community meetings and block parties and casual conversations that had nothing to do with what I owned or who I used to be. This was what belonging felt like when it was chosen instead of inherited. What family meant when it was built on shared values instead of shared blood. What home could be when it was created by intention instead of accident. Atticus graduated high school that spring. I received an invitation addressed in his careful handwriting. Not from his parents, but from him directly, a choice he had made, despite whatever pressure they had applied. I sent a card with my congratulations and a check for his college fund. Not because his parents expected it, but because he deserved support from someone who loved him without conditions attached. His thank you note arrived 2 days later, 3 pages of genuine gratitude and updates about his plans and questions about my new life. The kind of letter that reminded me why grandmothers existed in the first place. He was going to study engineering at Columbia, wanted to build bridges and skyscrapers and structures that would outlast the people who created them. His dreams were solid and practical and beautiful in ways that made me proud of the man he was becoming. Money had given me choices I never thought possible. But more importantly, it had given me the freedom to choose myself, to build a life based on my values instead of other people's expectations, to discover who I was when I was not busy apologizing for existing. The woman who had sat on that park bench with nowhere to go was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth was not determined by whether her family wanted her around. The restaurant was expensive, the kind of place Gatsby and Scarlett frequented but had never invited me to before. White tablecloths and waiters who spoke in whispers. Menus without prices because money was supposed to be no object. They arrived together, dressed like they were attending a business meeting. Gatsby wore his best suit. Scarlett carried the same leather portfolio she had brought to evict me from my home. Old habits die hard. I watched them scan the dining room before spotting me. Saw Gatsby's rehearsed smile activate. Scarlett's performance of warmth beginning before she even reached the table. They had prepared for this conversation the way actors prepare for opening night. Gatsby hugged me carefully, as if I might break or disappear if he held too tight. Scarlett kissed my cheek with lips that felt cold against my skin. They sat across from me and made small talk about traffic and weather while we waited for menus. The conversation they had come to have hung in the air like smoke, unspoken but present in every careful gesture and measured word. Gatsby started with apologies, explained how the situation had gotten out of hand, how they had been under pressure and made decisions they regretted, how family was the most important thing, and they wanted to make things right. Scarlett nodded along with practiced timing, added supportive comments about learning from mistakes and growing stronger together. She spoke about family values and second chances and the importance of forgiveness. They had choreographed this performance perfectly, every word calculated to produce the desired result, every gesture designed to manipulate emotions they had spent months ignoring. I listened without interrupting, watched my son perform remorse he did not feel for an audience of one, observed his wife deploy charm like a weapon aimed at my wallet. The apologies dissolved into explanations, how they had been thinking about my best interests, how senior living facilities offered better care than they could provide, how the timing had been unfortunate, but the intentions were good, rewriting history in real time, transforming cruelty into kindness, making themselves the heroes of a story where they had been the villains. Gatsby reached across the table and took my hand. His touch felt foreign after months of absence. He spoke about moving forward together, about healing old wounds and building new memories, about family being forever no matter what happened. The words were beautiful, empty but beautiful. Scarlett opened her portfolio and pulled out photographs, pictures of houses they had been looking at, places where we could all live together like one big happy family, where I could have my own space but still be close enough for daily visits. The houses were magnificent, sprawling estates with guest wings and gardens and rooms enough for everyone. The kind of homes that appeared in magazines and real estate fantasies. They had done their research, calculated exactly how much my lottery winnings could buy, planned our shared future with the efficiency of a corporate merger. I asked about Atticus, how he felt about these grand plans for family reconciliation. Gatsby's smile faltered for just a moment. Scarlett's hand tightened on her portfolio. Their grandson was angry with them, had been since the day they forced me out of my home. He refused to discuss family gatherings or shared holidays or moving into houses bought with his grandmother's money. Atticus had chosen sides. And he had not chosen them. The waiter brought our meals, expensive dishes that tasted like cardboard in my mouth. I ate slowly while they outlined their vision for our future together. Listened to them negotiate the terms of my return to their lives. They offered everything except the one thing that mattered: genuine remorse for the pain they had caused, real recognition of what they had done to someone who had loved them without conditions. Instead, they gave me explanations and justifications and careful words designed to minimize their responsibility. They spoke about misunderstandings and miscommunications and unfortunate timing. But cruelty was not a misunderstanding. Abandonment was not miscommunication. Throwing your mother out of her home was not unfortunate timing. I set down my fork and looked at my son. Really looked at him. Searched for traces of the boy I had raised alone after his father died. The child who had promised to take care of me when I got old. He was gone, replaced by this stranger who spoke in corporate buzzwords and made promises he had already broken once. I told them I appreciated the invitation, thanked them for the meal, acknowledged their efforts to rebuild what they had destroyed. But some things could not be fixed with money or apologies or shared real estate. Gatsby's face crumpled. He looked like the 12-year-old boy who had cried when his father died. But grief over consequences was not the same as grief over actions. Regret about outcomes was not the same as regret about choices. Scarlett tried a different approach, spoke about loneliness and aging and the importance of family support, about how isolated I must feel living alone, how much better life would be with people who cared about me nearby. She was right about the loneliness, wrong about the solution. I had learned the difference between being alone and being lonely, between solitude and isolation, between chosen independence and forced abandonment. My life was full now, rich with relationships built on mutual respect instead of obligation, meaningful in ways that had nothing to do with shared DNA or legal documents. I wished them well, meant it even, hoped they would find happiness in whatever future they built together. But that future would not include me as anything more than a polite acquaintance they saw at family funerals. Gatsby asked about holidays, whether I would reconsider family gatherings, whether there was any chance of rebuilding what we had lost. I told him the truth, that what we had lost was not a relationship but an illusion, that I had mistaken being needed for being loved, that the difference mattered more than he could understand. We said goodbye in the restaurant parking lot. Gatsby hugged me again, longer this time. Scarlett shook my hand with the firm grip of someone closing a failed business deal. I drove home through streets that had once felt like exile, but now felt like freedom, past the neighborhood where I had been discarded, and into the neighborhood where I had been reborn. My apartment was quiet when I returned, peaceful in ways that had nothing to do with the absence of conflict, and everything to do with the presence of choice. I made tea and sat in my reading chair by the window, watched the sun set over the garden I had planted with my own hands, listened to children playing in the courtyard below. The mail had arrived while I was gone, a letter from Atticus, thick with news about his first semester at Columbia. His engineering classes were challenging but exciting. His professors thought he had real potential. He was making friends and joining clubs and building the kind of life that made grandmothers proud. He asked about my volunteer work at the community center, wanted to know about my garden and my new apartment and whether I was truly happy. His questions were thoughtful and genuine in ways that reminded me why love was worth the risk of heartbreak. He would visit during spring break, had already planned his trip without consulting his parents, wanted to see my new life with his own eyes and make his own judgments about family loyalty. I folded his letter carefully and placed it on the table next to my chair. next to the latest photographs from my literacy students, and the thank you cards from the community center, and the small tokens of appreciation from neighbors who had become friends. This was what family looked like when it was chosen instead of inherited. What love felt like when it was earned instead of expected. What home meant when it was built on intention instead of accident. I had learned that sometimes the greatest gift is not being chosen, but discovering you never needed their permission to choose yourself. That dignity maintained in darkness eventually finds its own light. That love, once broken, leaves scars but also space for something better to grow. The lottery ticket had given me $8 million, but the real prize was discovering I had been worth loving all along.